Hello, welcome to Laser Pulse's overview of embedded research translation. I'm Christopher Rice, Research Translation Communication Lead at Indiana University and with the Laser Pulse Consortium, and I will be guiding you through this learning module today. Laser Pulse stands for Long-Term Assistance and Services for Research, Partners for University-Led Solutions Engine. This USAID project is led by Purdue University, and its consortium also includes Catholic Relief Services, Makerere University, University of Notre Dame, and Indiana University. Together, LaserPulse aims to provide research-driven, practical solutions to critical development challenges in USAID interest countries. LaserPulse does this by initiating a large network for collaboration between researchers and practitioners, building capacity through trainings, and by funding research translation projects all around the world in a variety of fields. As LaserPulse expands its network and reaches more researchers and practitioners, it will offer a series of learning modules. These short courses aim to provide an orientation to LaserPulse's approach, a foundation for mutual understanding of key research and research translation concepts, and also additional resources. This learning module focuses on an introduction to embedded research translation. LaserPulse seeks to connect researchers, thought leaders, innovators, and scientists with those on the ground doing the work, including NGO, civil society, private sector, and government actors around the same development targets, strengthen the capacity of practitioners to navigate, connect, and engage with the world of research and vice versa, and translate discoveries made through research into a format understood and applied by policymakers, end users, partners, and overall stakeholders in practice for development impact. This module's objectives are: review LaserPulse's definition of and approach to embedded research translation, consider the 4 pillars of embedded research translation, identify common challenges and consider best practices, and consider dissemination approaches for translation. Increasingly, researchers, practitioners, donors, policymakers are focused on the impact of collaborative research projects on development outcomes. This idea of how research translates into policy and practice and ultimately to impact has gained steam across disciplines and is an important area of exploration and effort in the development world. A range of terms are used for this, including knowledge translation, translational research, knowledge transfer, and research translation, among others. Many different definitions of research translation exist. How you define translation is often determined by who you are and the goals of your research or institution. Researchers may think about translation one way, practitioners another, policymakers yet another. In our context, research translation generally means translating discoveries made through research into a format that can be understood and applied by policymakers, end users, partners, and overall stakeholders in practice for development impact. A common approach to this form of knowledge transfer is a two-phase process in which research findings are translated into practical applications after research has concluded. LaserPulse, however, approaches research translation as an integrated component of the entire research cycle, built in from the very beginning of the project instead of as a final phase in the research process. LaserPulse affirms that research translation is most effective if it is embedded across all phases of the research project, from identifying the research topic to disseminating the findings for broader impact and scale. LaserPulse uses the term embedded research translation and defines it as an iterative co-design process among academics, practitioners, and other stakeholders in which research is intentionally applied to a development challenge. LaserPulse believes innovation and discovery can occur in research laboratories, in the field, as well as through the learning process throughout the implementation and scaling phases. Pathways to innovative field-tested solutions are reinforced through deep collaboration with the stakeholders closest to the development challenge, and more specifically, practitioners working to solve it. Recognizing that research translation is an iterative, collaborative process, LaserPulse advocates for development solutions to be derived in co-development between practitioners and researchers. LaserPulse's embedded research translation model is rooted in deep collaboration between researchers and practitioners and follows a process from discovery to field-tested solution to wider application and finally to impact. Here you can see LaserPulse's approach to research translation visually. As the graphic demonstrates, LaserPulse promotes a model in which research translation is embedded throughout the research process. Researchers and various development actors engage in close collaboration at the onset of the research project through the dissemination of the translated product, and together seek ways for the research to have wider application and impact. Results of this collaboration, detailed in the upper left, include discovery, learning, innovation, and a field-tested solution. Importantly, this is a non-linear process that incorporates potential failures and adaptation over multiple iterations, with the understanding that eventually the team develops a field-tested solution. Once the team has established a field-tested solution, they can then engage other, sometimes new, partners in dissemination. These steps in the upper right include increased awareness, replication and scale of the solution, wider application, and eventually large-scale impact. As we go through this course, we will talk about what LaserPulse considers to be the 4 key pillars of research translation: partnership, process, translation product, and dissemination. These 4 areas are also reflected in the translation criteria for the LaserPulse request for applications for research translation grants. At the core of effective research translation is effective partnership between researchers and other groups, practitioners, donors, government, private sector, who will apply and use the outcome of the research. The earlier partnerships can be established, and the clearer the understanding of goals and outcomes, the better. It's important at this stage to look at partners and establish their abilities and means to assist in research translation and eventually dissemination. Importantly, research will impact groups on the ground, real people with real problems. Find partners who can connect you to those people to learn about their concerns and what they would find helpful, and how they can assist in and benefit from research translation. Knowing and understanding each other's goals, priorities, constraints, and incentives can all help establish meaningful and productive partnerships. This kind of deep collaboration from the onset can often yield the most effective research translation solutions. This kind of deep partnership does take work. However, it is important to see the enormous benefits that can come from such collaboration. Strong partnership with practitioners can help researchers identify real-world research priorities, increase research impact, establish relationships with key actors, learn more about on-the-ground challenges, and collaborate with field experts on implementation ideas. Conversely, strong partnerships with researchers can help practitioners root their work in evidence, integrate research into current and future programming, learn about emerging sectoral trends, test emerging innovations and discoveries, and co-develop field-tested solutions to development problems. When carried out effectively, such collaboration uses the strong points of NGOs, researchers, and policymakers to result in products, practices, and policies that have built-in uptake. You can view here expertise and limitations of partners. Consider pooling expertise together toward mitigating limitations. Collaborative partnerships can be formal through large donor-funded projects or programs, These partnerships are usually undertaken after a relationship of trust is built. Partnerships draw on the strengths of all partners. However, sometimes they are based on immediate need and opportunity, which can present some clashes of culture. The following slides show some examples of formal partnerships drawing on past experiences of Laser Pulse Consortium member collaborations. USAID Guinea's Collaborative Agriculture Education and Market Improvement Program to strengthen sustainable agriculture and improve adoption of proven technologies by Ghanaian farmers. A partnership among Queen Elizabeth Central Hospital in Malawi, Purdue, and Save the Children to facilitate kangaroo mother care. Collaborative partnerships can also be semi-formal or informal, through small funding amounts to test a concept as a potential solution, or to adapt a solution from one context to another. In this case, the partnership might be new, usually arisen through a matchmaking or partnership opportunity to bring together the researcher and NGO partner. The following slides offer examples of variations in less formal projects. Cloud-based emergency response system developed between Purdue and Catholic Relief Services. The Purdue Utility Platform, developed in collaboration with a Columbian university and farmers cooperatives. And a collaborative program to engage former homeless youth in Kenya in engineering skills and problem-solving processes. A range of partnership models exist on a spectrum of small to large and informal to formal. Some examples include short-term tasks and consultancies, jointly funded research, small agreements with no formal funding, programs and degrees, institutional level partnerships, and network or alliance partnerships. Explore what kind of partnership would be most appropriate and effective for your goals. While deep collaboration is ideal, it's not always easy. Sometimes deep collaboration can be difficult, particularly as partners wrestle with certain aspects of the partnership, like different organizational culture, structures, and systems. Establishing the terms of the arrangement, timelines, incentives and values, approaches to intellectual property, definitions of success, and what your approaches are toward donors and finances. Think about a time in your experience where you have gone through some challenges in a partnership. What kinds of things did you find difficult? And looking at some of the challenges that you have identified, what might be some ways to respond to those challenges? Now that you've considered these, let's look at some potential challenges and their responses. If you need to establish parameters around cost structures, you can clearly define these with joint input and budget management terms. If you need to clarify data ownership and use, you can clearly define intellectual property sharing terms early on. You can read below some additional examples. You might have explored alternative possibilities. The key is that engaging in this thought process with your partner will help guide your relationship moving forward and ultimately impact the quality of your work. Though they are not easy, effective partnerships are at the heart of embedded research translation. Exploring and planning for this partnership is critical for any translation strategy. For any additional support you need in developing your partnership, guidance and templates are available, such as the National Cancer Institute's Collaboration and Team Science Field Guide. While establishing a partnership is critical, once it's underway, researchers and practitioners will also have to determine a process for working together. Considering questions like, Who will be involved from your institution? What kinds of activities will you do together and separately? What costs might be associated with these activities? What other factors need to be taken into consideration before you begin to work together on this project? Answering these questions help all partners build a plan or a roadmap that will ease their collaboration. Another way to think about this step is to consider it a move from establishing your partnership and the components behind it to actually working together. This is what we call the process phase, or how you actively collaborate to complete the work. To dive deeper into consideration of the process stage, let's consider a scenario. You are an education researcher, and you and your institution have a strong relationship with an NGO partner. You have worked with them on a number of occasions, working with one of their country program teams on a research project you led on early grade reading, where they helped with stakeholder identification and analysis, and another time with some of their evaluation staff on another project where they supported data collection and field testing. You have now decided that based on this close relationship and strong partnership, you will work together on a donor-funded project to research effective ways to support early grade learning in conflict areas. You have decided on the country where you will focus this research, and together are now honing the research questions, and you have to begin to plan the actual process for how you are going to do this work together. Now consider the following. What are the key questions that you will need answered to go from the initial partnership stage to actual practical planning for working together on this project? And how might you go about getting them answered? Please prepare to enter 2 potential answers for each. You might have thought through who from the teams will be involved, who needs to approve which part of the plan, how will the budget be developed, do we agree on costs and things like overhead, how will we each approach IRB, will students be involved, and more. Explore ways to answer these questions in your partnerships. Now consider how you might go about answering these questions. Most important are time and intention. Taking the time to sit down together to consider the details of how you will collaborate is critical for the collaboration's success. A range of project management approaches and tools exist that can support this kind of effective planning for a strong process. Things like work plans, detailed implementation plans, Gantt charts, and more can also help guide teams toward a comprehensive process. Ask your partner what tools they have and like to use to plan their work. Remember, one right way does not exist to plan for your translation collaboration. However, intentional effort early on in the relationship toward planning processes will help shepherd the partnership to a more successful result. The strong process that your partnership has created leads to the generation of a translated product. Deep collaboration with researchers, practitioners, policymakers, private sector can bring forth new ideas, best practices, new evidence, and sometimes even a tested solution to a development challenge. However, to move beyond the initial collaborators and context, it will need to be adapted for use as a product, practice, or policy. This adaptation for use results in translation products. Translation products are collaboratively planned for, designed, and adapted for use by the researcher practitioner team. USA defines adapted for use as a research product or set of research results that has been tailored with the intent of facilitating the application of that research. Can include policy briefs, policy recommendations, editorials, media, infographics, and blogs. Workshops and workshop presentations designed for decision makers and other non-technical audiences can also be considered a research product tailored for use. When this adaptation is complete, it will result in what we call translation products. The most effective translation products are not added on at the end of a collaboration. Instead, they're conceived of early on and deeply connected with the target audience believed to be key to practice or policy change. Too often, people define translation of research as a two-page policy brief. While policy briefs are useful, many other vehicles exist to translate research into practice, such as programs, conference presentations, trainings, operating manuals, videos, guidebooks, and business plans. Key to an effective product is the connection between the targeted change and a target audience to affect that change. Remember, the product itself is a very small part of the process. You must find ways to use it. The most effective translation products are not added at the end of collaboration, but planned for from the very beginning and well connected to target audience. Here are some successful examples of research translation. Note the different varieties of approaches and products, and that sometimes research translation results in multiple products. You can visit our website at laserpulse.org to learn more about these examples. As we've mentioned, the most effective translation products are not added at the end, but conceived early on and deeply connected with a target audience or audiences. The traditional research, package, and publish strategy is not enough to impact development, and neither is creating a product without a target in mind. You must communicate the right message with the right audience at the right time to have a greater research impact. Ideally, the people that will be targeted will have been involved from the very beginning. However, that may not always be possible. The target user audience could also evolve and grow over time. When thinking about the kind of translation product that will be most helpful in translating the research outcome into a real-world application, it's important to think about the target audience. The target audience is the group that you target your product toward. Who stands to benefit? Who has an interest in it? Who is an agent of change? And who has the capacity to influence policy? We're now going to look at a short scenario to think about how the results of a researcher-practitioner collaboration might be translated into policy or practice. Let's consider our previous scenario. An NGO and research institution were working together on a project to research effective ways to support early grade learning in conflict areas. At this point, the teams have established their partnership and have done some extensive planning on how they will work together. Now imagine that as a result of their work, they have discovered that the inclusion of school counseling support programming had a significant impact on learning outcomes, and that a particular counseling support curriculum was especially effective. Now consider, who might have a particular interest in or benefit from this finding? And what kind of translation product would be most effective for this target group? Possible answers could include teachers and counselors at a local school as your target audience, with a training program as your product. You could also target school administrators with a two-page brief on the curriculum, packaged with the curriculum itself. Lastly, you could target a higher level with the Ministry of Education, with policy recommendations for wider adoption of the curriculum. Many more possibilities exist. Consider the multiple levels of potential target audiences: local, regional, national. In the research translation process, you could have more than one target audience. Remember, identify who you need to interact with to achieve your goal. Map the important actors in and context of the field. Assess the extent to which you have to engage with politics. And choose your level: local or community, regional, national, international? As you're developing a translation product, here are a few helpful hints. Consult with research users to determine policy or practice pathways to change. Identify your audience early in your collaboration. Research your audience. The better you know your audience, the more likely you are to select the right tool with the right message to influence them. Identify your audience's information needs. What information do they need to take action based on your work? What is their level of conceptual understanding of your topic? What types of messages and media do they respond to? Where do they consume information? In person, at meetings or events or journals? Does social media appeal to them? Identify your product's value added. Does it solve a problem? What need or want does it fulfill for your audience? And tailor your language to your audience. Scientific language is more accessible and visible if presented plainly. And recall our section on establishing your partnership and developing your process. Who did you determine is responsible for developing your product and connecting it with your target audience? What budget did you determine can facilitate this process? Who can help you identify and reach target audience groups? To make sure you communicate your key findings and messages well, here are some tips to properly plan for the communication of your translated research. Tell a story with a narrative, drama, the human element overlaid with discovery and impact. Get at your who, what, when, where, why, and how. Write plainly and clearly without jargon. Move beyond your work's general conclusions to focus on how to use or apply knowledge. Include recommended steps to action for the reader. And change the way you represent your data. Visualize it in a simple graphic or chart. Present ideas based on data rather than the data itself. Developing an effective translation product is invaluable for application and use of research. However, to move beyond a single target application, use, or audience, it is important to consider the channels, platforms, and networks that can help disseminate research outcomes and translation products for wider replication and scale. Dissemination is targeted communication with specific audiences for the purpose of continuing the uptake of results and usage of products. Dissemination facilitates wider application by increasing awareness and opening opportunities for replication and scale. Wider application of your research translation into practice leads to greater development impact. Creating a policy brief alone does not complete research translation and does not create impact. Much the same as product, audience matters. Determine what strategies are most effective for each audience to enable your project to effectively deliver solutions to the right actors in development toward eventual scale and wider application of your development solution. In our outline of the embedded research translation process, dissemination occurs along the pathway from networks, policymakers, private sector partners, and donors through increased awareness, replication, and wider application. This process usually leads to a greater impact of research and better informed decision-making for international development outcomes. This is not easy for many engaged in the partnership. Dissemination is an active, targeted process that similarly needs to be planned for from the beginning. Allow for resources, time and budget, to dedicate toward materials for distribution, presentations, and events. Understand who is responsible for this component, what activities you undertake, what groups you engage, and what resources you develop. Many conclusions from target audience resonate here. This process begins with identifying your translation multipliers and possible avenues for scale. If you have a field-tested solution, what steps do you need to take to ensure it is more widely tested and adopted? You engage other groups beyond your initial partnership. You establish new relationships or strengthen existing ones. Private sector entities can provide investment, marketing, and sales help to grow your distribution. Donors can provide additional funding for scale. Policymakers can help increase adoption of your recommendations in other locations. Finally, all parties have access to networks and events, which are crucial in dissemination. Like target audience, when engaging with these groups, identify who is a critical actor in your field and find the best way of reaching and ultimately influencing them. Exercises such as context mapping or stakeholder mapping can facilitate this process. Once you have a target audience or audiences for dissemination, do your homework to understand what content they are responsive to and what the best way of contacting them is. For a policymaker or a business, you might want to have a face-to-face meeting with a pitch of your translation product. Some fields are particularly responsive to yearly conferences or seminars. You could engage with a field-relevant community of practice or working group. When engaging with a specific audience, make sure you clearly understand the ask you are making and establish what the next steps would be. And for more widespread outreach, you can engage listservs, e-newsletters, webinars, and social media to build awareness about your translation product. In our previous scenario with our education curriculum, consider the audience and product you selected. Imagine your product has become a field-tested solution in a particular school. Where will you take this product next? You have the option to scale your solution. Perhaps you would propose this curriculum be implemented in your neighboring school districts. Do these schools and administrators have a regional annual event they attend? If so, how would you prepare to pitch your curriculum for usage more widely? Would this curriculum be utilized more widely across your country? Perhaps you should engage with the Ministry of Education about its use. Is this appropriate in another country or region? Do you need donor funding to implement additional projects elsewhere or around the world? While you might think of dissemination as an upward process to larger organizations or an outward process to interested academics or practitioners, an inward process is necessary as well. Consult with your local partners and immediate stakeholders for local knowledge on, context for, and means of dissemination. This insight on how information is shared on a local level might provide you with better tips for grassroots dissemination and how to effectively ensure project findings are communicated well in local environments. If you take your findings to another region or country, make sure you have the appropriate contacts to reference what changes might need to be adapted to accommodate for different conditions. This is a vital component in continuing to spread the solution you have found to the right places. It will also allow you to change course based on knowledge obtained on local applicability. Your project's timeline is aggressive in translating research into policy or practice. Note that many considerations for dissemination and scale might extend beyond the project lifecycle and necessitate planning in advance. Consider your project's sustainability. The findings you have and their applicability in practice or policy should not cease with your closeout report. Sustainability could require additional funding for similar work or for a project champion to carry on related work. This can also contribute to dissemination by continuing to push findings and implications to relevant actors after your project's end. Note that locals championing your messages or having teacher-to-teacher or farmer-to-farmer initiatives set up can contribute to the impact your project has. And on a national level, make sure you have good contacts to work within existing government priorities for your project's outreach now and in the future. To summarize, we have covered approaches to research translation partnership, process, translation product, and dissemination. Laserpulse sees the trajectory of translation as a cyclical process from discovery to field-tested solution to wider application to impact, so it's difficult to determine one finite point when translation is complete. As research translation progresses, it is possible to measure success by examining the outcomes of the research itself, the outputs of the translated products and their dissemination, the outcomes of their use, and finally, the impact of that wider application. While a full evaluation of research translation impact is beyond LaserPulse's sphere of operation, the project works to support researcher and practitioner stakeholders to understand the goals of translation and strategies to support its successful implementation. Certainly, the entirety of the embedded research translation process can take longer than just a few years. LaserPulse hopes to expedite this process by facilitating partnerships, offering trainings and tools, and providing direct support. But some components of dissemination might exist after a project's lifecycle. Thank you for participating in this short course. Keep in mind the 4 pillars of partnership, process, translation product, and dissemination. Remember that the most effective translation approaches are rooted in deep partnership, are iterative, and include intentional investment of time and thought early and often in their intended application and use. For your reference, we have also included resources that could be helpful in the research translation process.